Now we're going to take a look at Atok Cement. Irfan Amanullah, tell us your story in terms of what's going on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ICAP and Terabase, for providing an opportunity to me to speak before this gathering of the professional accountants and the members of the premier accounting body of the country and learned participants. Well, my presentation is not a formal kind of a presentation. It is more like a case study which I encountered during my early days with the company, and the challenge that I had to face after the balance sheet management. It's basically a case study that I encountered. When I joined the company, the sector was in a very critical condition, the entire cement sector. And the biggest challenge for the company was to utilize its idle capacity and to arrest the falling margins. So we prepared some kind of a strategy and tried to get out the company from that kind of a situation and turn the company into a profitable venture. In fact, it was a period 2000-2004. So if I quickly go into that period, what it was really, it was the latter half of the 90s, perhaps to be considered as the worst part as far as the economic and political situation of the country can do after the post-1971 Pakistan. In fact, the country conducted its nuclear test in May 98, and thereafter the economic managers of the country took a decision to freeze the dollar accounts. As a result of that, there was a lot of flight of capital from Pakistan, and the rupee-dollar parity went to its adverse. From 40, 41 rupees, the rupee came down to 48 or 50 rupees. Because of the crisis in the post-Kargil war situation, the political government of the country was overthrown. And as a result of that, a new military-led setup came into the country, which again shaken the confidence of the local investors as well as the international investors. A massive outflow of investment was witnessed, with the GDP growth was almost negligible, and the stock market index was at its lowest. Cement, as you know, is a part of the construction sector, which is perhaps one of the largest sector after the agriculture. And if I can give you one example that how big the sector is, and it is not coming into the GDP growth of the country, is that if you could correctly value the Defense Housing Authority of the Karachi, it would be around 5 to 6 billion US dollars, which is out of the GDP. So you can imagine what kind of sector in which we are and what kind of potential that are still untapped. The sectorial scenario was not bright either, and against the total capacity of 16 million tons, which at that time was available, only 9 million was the utilization of the local market, which is like 58-59%. Against the cumulative average growth of over 7% since 1951, the growth in the latter half of the 90s was zero. Literally, it was zero. There was no growth at all in the sector. The situation at our company was not exception. Our capacity utilization was only 59%, and our return on equity was dropped to its lowest to hardly 2 to 3%. And if you compare it with that at that time benchmark of about 15 to 20% return on equity, it was almost 0%. The average gross margins of the industry in the fiscal year 98-99 were at around 8%, SCPL 12%, and the profit after tax margins of the industry were negative 5%, SCPL minus 2%. So what was the business challenge? That is the topic today. What was the business challenge at that time? The business challenge was how to utilize 40% idle capacity. That was the challenge in front of us after the balance sheet management. The finance department of the company at that time took the initiative. We proposed to the management a strategy. And what was the strategy? It was a three-pronged strategy. First, to utilize the idle capacity to its fullest, and accordingly, to arrest the downfall of the margins. The significant elements of the strategy was, first, explore the regional markets. God has given us everything. We all know Allah has given us everything except the leadership. So that was the time that we should explore our resources. So we went for the regional markets. We changed the local market mix, and we made the product cost competitive before the international market. Okay, so what we did, first we went to the export market. For the first time in the history of the country, we initiated and explored the regional markets. We all know that the markets of UAE, Middle East, they are far mature construction markets as compared to the Pakistani markets. So to sell a product was not an easier task. India with 150 million tons of capacity and China with the 800 million tons of capacity were the major competitors against a 16 million tons capacity Pakistan. The markets of the region, like UAE, Qatar, as I said, far matured in terms of quality, not only quality, but they're also matured in the supply chain management system as well as in the logistics. And here the logistics was the biggest issue with the kind of activities that we see at the Karachi port. Efforts were made first to introduce the Pakistani cement and clinker through the big trading houses of the UAE, which were predominantly kind of the houses where the Indians were quite dominant. We introduced Pakistani brands through the forums of the Intersam and Samtec. Intersam and Samtec are the two biggest forums of the international cement community, whereby the technical and the commercial experts of the region come together and discuss the opportunities. So for the first time, we represented ourselves into these forums. We gave presentations to the people over there, and we in fact introduced ourselves that what we are. As a result of that, the company got its first order of 35,000 tons of export of clinker to UAE in 2002-2003. That was the first consignment from Pakistan which ever went to the Middle East. And there were two follow-up orders of 35,000 tons each, and that too to the Holcim. Holcim, if I may be allowed to say, is the second largest cement manufacturer in the world. They accepted the quality of the Pakistani cement and clinker, and they ordered 2 consecutive repeat orders at that time. The second study was to introduce the market mix. When we were dealing with the marketing department of the company, all the time they were in terms of quantity only. They were least concerned about the prices. We advised them that the price is an important element if we want to arrest the downfall of the GP. And through what? We advised them to focus on those markets which are within the 100-kilometer radius of your plant and not go beyond that. First fill that market requirement, then go beyond. So Karachi became the focal point or the cornerstone of our plant, and we sold maximum to the Karachi market. So even with 59% capacity that we were utilizing, our sales revenue increased by slightly changes in the market mix. What we did at that time, that we started to follow up the marketing department through various management reportings. These management reportings were on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and on a monthly basis. So we were monitoring the daily sales revenue. In fact, the daily sales revenue we were monitoring, and if at any point of time there's a dip in sales revenue because of any change in market mix, we were immediately advising the marketing department that look where they are going wrong. Cost competitiveness. Those of you who follow the cricket, they know that how big the Ambuja and Ultratech Cement of India are. They virtually purchase the entire stadiums and the boundary walls except the cricketers. They don't purchase the cricketers, but they purchase virtually everything on the ground. And this is what their advertising budget was. So they were quite a household name in the mature markets of the UAE and the Middle East. They were cost competitive also. Indian cement industry from the day one was on the coal. We were on the gas and furnace oil. So the cost was a basic element when we were competing with the Indians. Concept of alternate fuels were introduced in the plants, and the higher prices furnace oil and gas were replaced through the cheaper source of coal. As a result of that, the overall average cost came down and the prices become competitive. A concept of variable plus pricing was introduced in the company, that everything cannot be sold on the 100% cost plus profit basis, but they can be sold. That can be sold on variable plus to absorb the fixed overheads. Now the last but not the least, there's a small conclusion because there are certain dignitaries are sitting there, and this is my small experience that I'd like to share.